Catherine and I are going to be hosting today and for the week, and we're going to continue our conversation and thoughts about joy, mudita. So as I've been continuing to think about this, what keeps bubbling up into my mind are thoughts of generosity and the relationship between generosity and joy. I don't really think it's very hard to feel that connection. We all know that feeling that to give feels really good, and to feel someone's happiness in receiving feels really good. In Buddhism, it's said that practicing generosity allows you to feel happiness 3 times. Before giving, the mind of the giver is happy. While giving, the mind of the giver is made peaceful. And after having given, the mind of the giver is uplifted. The Buddha knew how important generosity was to spiritual practice. And when he first began teaching, he instructed his monks, the ones that were committed to him, to set up their communities on the outskirts of the villages. And he set up guidance for how to live in this community. The monks were to renounce all but the most basic possessions, and also to not cook and to not handle money. So because of this, the monks needed to depend on the lay people that lived in the nearby town to supply food and essentials. And then in turn, the monks were to provide spiritual support to the lay community. This relationship created a structure that allowed generosity to be practiced every day. It was so simple and really so genius. So, for the past 2,500 years and up until today, this is the part of a culture in many Buddhist countries. It happens in rural villages, and it also happens in the big, sprawling cities of Asia. And I have had the very good fortune to witness this many times in Phnom Penh in Cambodia, which is a crazy, busy, hectic city. And so just for a minute, see if you can picture this. The monks leave their temple walking barefoot or with flip-flops, silently and in single file, in deep orange robes at dawn. And they travel through the crowded, chaotic city streets, just exuding this sense of peacefulness. They carry these empty bowls, and lay people come out to the edge of the street to greet them with reverence. They frequently bow. And they offer bowls of steamed rice and stir-fried meats and veggies and fruits. Even in the poorest countries like Cambodia, this ritual is practiced every morning. And it infuses this spirit of generosity right into the middle of daily life. It's woven right into the fabric of the culture. There's so much in this ritual that we can learn from. Lay people deeply learn generosity, and monks learn to receive with gratitude and without preference. So much is exchanged in the encounter. I feel like the giver becomes the receiver, and the receiver is also the giver. And there's a potential for joy and happiness there. In my mind, I see the empty bowl that's carried by the monk as really symbolic. Right there in the center of the exchange, it's this place of vulnerability. And if you remember, Jay spoke about how vulnerability was one of the underpinnings of joy, and how difficult, maybe even a little scary, it can be to rest in that place of openness and not knowing. I think of the monks who don't know day to day where their meals will come from, nor do they get to choose what they're going to eat. They have to trust that their bowls will be filled and they will eat. So they're trusting in the generosity of the lay people. And the bowl into which the lay people make their offerings allows them to learn to trust that there'll be enough, even as they're giving something away. So they get to tap into kind of this abundance of life. So it's all right there in the bowl. I find it really beautiful. And it makes me wonder how in our culture, we make generosity a practice. We don't have such a daily ritual, such a visual cue of monks walking our streets that remind us to practice, that remind us to open our hearts and to connect and care for each other. It's just not built in the same way. So I think we have to be a little bit more purposeful in our practice. Joseph Goldstein, he suggests that at every opportunity, when an impulse of generosity arises, be generous. Whether it's big things or little things, whether it's making a meal for a friend or just letting someone get in front of you in a checkout line. Whatever it is, when you think of it, just do it. And then watch what arises in your mind and heart. How does it feel? And what comes up for you? I'm really trying to take this practice on, and it's been interesting. You know, the first thing that I've noticed is that I have a lot of thoughts of generosity, and I don't always follow through. And I kind of wonder why not. And sometimes maybe it's lack of time, which also kind of equates to being a little too busy. Or maybe it's lack of energy. So I'm just kind of noticing that and playing with it and seeing if I can just press that edge a little bit. But the more I try to follow through, the more I learn. And what I learn about is the joy of giving, the opening of my heart, and the limits that I bump up against. I had a recent experience with someone in my family who needed some financial support. And I found myself hesitating in my desire to offer it. Here I was with a loved one who needed something, and I was taking on this practice of generosity. And my mind was filled with thoughts and excuses of not wanting to be enabling, of being stingy and not wanting to let go of quote unquote my money, of questioning personal responsibility. It wasn't a nice feeling. It did not feel good. And it was a little humbling for me. My heart felt so constricted. So I needed to remind myself, and I want to remind all of us, that like the other heart practices, generosity is a practice of purification. Before our hearts feel pure and generous and wholehearted, we really might experience the opposite. We might come up and meet greed and fear and resentment, these constrictions in our heart. And they really, if we look at them, they feed this sense of self. Practicing generosity puts us face to face with our clinging, to our holding on, to these thoughts of me, my, and mine. Susie Harrington, who is a teacher out in Spirit Rock, she speaks about a letting go that happens when we're generous. In whatever is offered, we're letting go of our attachment to it and giving it away. And for that moment, that sense of self relaxes. We're making connection with the receiver. It doesn't matter what the offering is. Each time we give, in the moment we let go of selfing, when we let go of the constriction of holding on, we come into this relationship with a sense of wholeness. Each letting go is like an exercise. It stretches our hearts just a little bit. And slowly, really slowly, with patience, our hearts grow. I think of this quote by Hafiz, which I really love. I repeat it to myself a lot. That goes, even after all this time, the sun never said to the earth, you owe me. Look what happens with a love like that. It lights the whole sky. I think that captures what I'm talking about, metaphorically at least. What comes to mind is being wholehearted in my generosity, just like the sun is wholehearted. Finding a wholeness that's there when selfing relaxes, when we're not encumbered with me, my, mine. Our hearts can feel like the sun lighting up the sky, right? Open and expansive. And I wonder if what might be going on in your head, I know that sometimes I can hesitate too, about this idea of giving so wholeheartedly. It makes us feel vulnerable. We're afraid it means we might lose ourselves, right? We might burn out. We might not have enough. But I don't think that's the case. I think instead, when we're being generous in this wholehearted way, we take into consideration both ourselves and the other. We find generosity for both of them. So we're not giving away at the detriment of our own well-being. But it does mean that we're feeling our giving. Gil Fronsdale says that true generosity asks that we give a bit more than what's expected, that we feel the offering. And what we're feeling is the sense of letting go of self, that stretch. And each time that you feel it, that you let go just a little, feel a little vulnerable, you're learning a little more about freeing your heart. And it's right there in that moment when our hearts relax and open, even if just for a minute or two, or even a moment or two, the joy has the possibility of arising. And it's joy within ourselves and joy in another's joy. Mudita. That's pretty good inspiration for practice, I think. So let's do it. Thank you so much for your attention.